It's your boy Skilled Fawn. Hope everyone is having a fantastic day. Today we're going to be talking about the Battlefront 3 curse and the history of it. To start though, we gotta go back in time to understand what happened. So the story starts in 1973 when George Lucas and his partner Gary Kurtz set out to shape a world around space opera. This was after George Lucas directed American Graffiti, which is critically acclaimed. Lucas and Kurtz went through various ideas and stories, but in 1975, the second draft, they decided Luke to be a farm boy, not an aged general. This was alongside other revisions. In the third draft, Obi-Wan was introduced, with Leia and Han's relationship being more fleshed out. Eventually, George reached his magnum opus with his fourth draft of the script that would be eventually used for filming. Next, in 1977, Star Wars was released, and fans from around the world were amazed by the story and world that George Lucas created. Following the 1977 release, there would be 2 additional films every 3 years, 1980 Empire Strikes Back and 1983 with Return of the Jedi. While making the trilogy, George Lucas began to expand the Star Wars universe with TV shows, extended universe books and comics, and eventually video games. In 1979, George Lucas created a computer division to expand his universe beyond just movies. The main purpose of these 2 divisions was graphics and computers. In subsequent years, the 2 divisions would go off in their own directions, with the graphics becoming the well-known Pixar studio, and the computer division would turn to be Lucasarts, working with the Atari. At first, Atari held the license for game development of Star Wars games. This is one reason why there were not Star Wars games right from the get-go, but also because Atari used Lucasarts to release original new IPs. This spawned BallBlazer, a game released in 1984 that showed what Lucasarts were capable of alongside the other games they released. The first Star Wars game was released in 1991 and was titled Star Wars. This was available for the NES, Game Boy, and more. The game's main objective was to destroy the Death Star. Many more Star Wars games and other IPs of LucasArts were made during this time. Between 1985 and 2003, LucasArts has helped or created in development over 50 plus games, and over 20 of those are Star Wars games. In comparison, EA between 2013 developed and released 5 Star Wars titles alongside the other IPs they had. Which then brings us to the year that Battlefront was born. In 2002, Pandemic Studios began development of Battlefront and was later released in 2004. The game included playable vehicles and ships while allowing the player to be a trooper within the Republic versus CIS war, or between the Rebellion versus Empire. From being a simple clone trooper to a dark trooper, there was a lot to do within the game and variety for the time. The game included 16 playable maps, and eventually, with the addition of Jabba's palace, making it 17. The gameplay of Battlefront was unlike a lot of games at the time, and many people were quick to jump in and get hooked. To start, the player can either be in first or third person, and is able to select a trooper to use. Next, the player must capture the 5 command posts throughout the map, or reduce the enemy's reinforcements to 0. After publishing the game, Pandemic and LucasArts gave the community modding tools able to make their own maps and battles. Going back and playing this one, I actually really enjoyed the slower pace and more methodical way of this one compared to the second one, but I still love the second one a lot more. As I mentioned, many people were fascinated by the game, and so they played, and waited for the next one. In early to mid 2005, Pandemic Studios announced another Battlefront title and would release alongside the Revenge of the Sith DVD. The game would release with more content than the previous game and would have new modes. The two biggest of Battlefront 2 were the much improved campaign and Galactic Conquest modes. The campaign was more fleshed out and given a different perspective on the known story, focusing on the 501st Legion that accompanied Anakin and others throughout the galaxy. This was much different than Battlefront 1. Both games had excellent voice acting, but is most notable in Battlefront 2 when Tamora Morrison is saying the monologue at the beginning and end of each mission, and it is just beautiful to hear. Also, he voices each of the clones too, so watch those wrist rockets!
Watch those wrist rockets! Watch those wrist rockets! Watch those wrist rockets!
The game included 24 maps with various game modes and factions. Even neutral factions can be seen, such as Jawas and other species within the Star Wars universe. The game modes include Instant Action, which allows the player to select maps and game modes. Conquest, player views a galaxy map and has to conquer and hold all the planets. Hunt mode is where the species of the planet and the opposing faction fight. And Hero Assault is where the enemy team and your team all control a hero or a villain, depending on if you're the good or bad guys. My family had this game on the PS2 and the PSP. I vaguely remembered the differences, but was really surprised when researching how different they were. For starters, the PSP version didn't have Rise of the Empire mode, or simply the campaign. Instead, it had 3 missions where the player would do various objectives in each, but was heavily neutered due to the performance of the PSP compared to the other consoles. This change gave the PSP version a slightly lower rating than the others. Overall, this game had more to offer and a higher rating than the previous game, so it was only inevitable that a Battlefront 3 would come out. Or so everyone thought. With the Star Wars train going strong, with the second trilogy completed, and many games coming out, it seemed impossible that something big could go wrong. Shortly after Battlefront 2 was released, Free Radical Design would start to develop Battlefront 3. This was rumored in 2006, and then in 2008, the company lost the right to develop the game. In 2012, co-founder of Free Radical Design would go to state that the game was nearly complete when it was cancelled. And fast forward to today, and it's even more depressing. So, Michael Barkley, and I quote, "I feel like it's been long enough now to come out and say Star Wars Battlefront 3 was going to be legit incredible. And the fact it got cancelled 2 yards from the finish line is an absolute crime. Gamers don't know what they were robbed of." Quote. Since this cancellation, many people have speculated what it could have actually been like. Thankfully, we can see how the gameplay loop would have worked. People have been able to play an early version of the game. The big differences of the game would have been that the space combat and ground combat were majorly improved over the previous versions. I know personally I would have loved to have the space battles and ground battles be interconnected, or one would affect the other. Also, it would have been cool if the player could stay on the ground for the battle or go to space whenever they choose to. Unfortunately, Battlefront 3 would not be released, and Star Wars as a whole would go down a much different path. George Lucas had been directing and making movies for a very long time, and he was getting tired. He knew he couldn't hold on to his children forever, as he called it, so he wanted to cash out on the prize while he could. George Lucas sat down with Disney executives and sold his IP for a little over $4 billion. This included Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Willow, and more. Unfortunately, one game that many people were looking forward to was Star Wars 1313. This game was very hyped up, and for good reason. It was looking to be this GTA-esque bounty hunter game, and you started on Coruscant, which was even cooler. I remember it getting canceled and being very let down, and this was because of the Disney acquisition. The next things to happen would be Darth Kathleen Kennedy, quote-unquote, staying true to George Lucas. Movies and TV shows were in the works, but the main focus was the new sequel trilogy that many fans were excited for at the time, including I. In 2013, Lucasarts announced that they were shutting down by orders of Disney, but keeping a ghost team to handle the licensing of the IP and help the newest company join the ring. Disney knew that Star Wars games were important for the longevity of the company and to entertain consumers. And so, with LucasArts removed, Disney reached an agreement with a new company. Disney and Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy reached out to EA to discuss working together for Star Wars games. In 2013, they reached an agreement to make Star Wars games for years to come, as President KK describes, which we all know wouldn't happen, to be honest, which is just so sad. I'm obviously happy for the Battlefronts, the second-gen Battlefronts, and Fallen Order and Survivor, but I think another company would have done a lot better. The deal would last 10 years and give exclusivity rights to EA for Star Wars games. The first game that they decided was Battlefront. A few years after the Disney acquisition, EA announces that a Battlefront game will be released in late 2005. This was revealed at a Star Wars celebration in California. Months later, the game would release and players were hyped to play the game. But unfortunately, in this time of games, pay-to-win elements would be included. Though it wasn't as bad as Battlefront 2. This was due to the fact that DLC was necessary for the good items in the game. But that wasn't an issue at the beginning, which is kind of the opposite of Battlefront 2, but as it had a lot of problems at the beginning. The game released with a variety of game modes and characters, and this one focused mostly on the Rebel and Empire battles. There were a series of single-player and co-op minigames, but not a fleshed-out campaign or anything like that. The most notable game modes out of the 14 were Hero Hunt, Walker Assault. The game definitely had its fair share of bugs and glitches, but devs were always quick to patch them out. As I mentioned, there were a lot of DLCs for the game, and these included the Battle of Jakku, Outer Rim, Bespin, Death Star, and more. So this game actually had a pretty good life cycle. For me, I really enjoyed the game and put countless hours into it, but I couldn't even imagine the excitement when EA announced their newest game. So shortly after the original, Battlefront 2 was born and had very mixed reception. The game featured all eras of Star Wars. It had a single player, a very laughable one, a multiplayer, and co-op modes. As I mentioned, it had mixed reception, and it had such a bad paywall and changed governments around the world, their laws, so it's just how bad it was. Like the previous game, it had a pay-to-win element, though it was worse at launch because everything was a paywall. It would literally take days of grinding to get one character, such as Darth Vader. Thankfully, this was reversed, but it took a long time, almost a year in fact, of reverting progression, cases, and the grind element, patching things up. Eventually, the developers made a great game that still holds up well. There are 13 missions within the campaign and 12 game modes. Battlefront 2 had many notable characters base game and added them throughout its life cycle. Would have been nice to get more characters in the original Battlefront 2, but hey, that's modern games for you. Like freaking Mace Windu, or they literally had Ahsoka and Ventress's voice lines in the game, but it's like the Starfighter Assault was pretty underrated. It's hard to master, but it has very interesting battles. Also, each time I look at the ISB agent and see Padme's face with a scar, it's just another punch in the gut to what it could have been. The game is actually really fun. I still play it with my friends today.
Sad boy hours are bien.
Be Yoda, and you have to imitate Yoda the entire game.
Do it, I will. Accept it, I do.
Heroes vs. Villains and Galactic Assault are my two favorite modes. An update was released by EA in 2020, announcing that the game wasn't going to get any new updates. The plan was going to move forward with Battlefield 5 instead of a new Battlefront, EA's newest title. Since then, many devs have come forward talking about their experiences and what they wish for. So with Battlefront 2's live service coming to an end, the hope for Battlefront 3 is very slim. There have been rumors that a game is coming, but nothing ever is credible or holds weight. No formal announcement has been made saying a game is in development. I would be so excited for the announcement of this game, but I feel spin-off is meant for another developer in the future. I like playing Battlefront 2017, but EA messed up so badly at the beginning that I fear how they would manipulate the next game. So what's next? With Battlefront 3 seemingly not in development within the near future, the best thing is that another developer will take up the mantle and make Battlefront games. Luckily, with Jedi Survivor and other games in the near future, Star Wars games aren't looking too bad. But what do you guys think? I would like to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Over 99% of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed. Thank you for watching again. Skilled Fawn out.